Hello everybody, I am Sreya Sudevan of class 10, Silver Hills Public School, KOZHIKODE. I shall be continuing with the chapter Nationalism in India, and now let us move on to the second part of this chapter, the non-cooperation movement. In this session, I shall be covering the following topics. What was the non-cooperation movement? Why was the movement launched? How did the movements unfold? Who participated in the movement? How did different groups of people conceive the idea of nationalism? And finally, why was the movement called off? So, to begin with the topic non-cooperation movement, the word non-cooperation itself gives us a basic idea or an outline about what the movement was based on. Non-cooperation basically means a failure or refusal to cooperate with someone or something, especially a form of a protest. It was one of the most important political and historical movement of history. It was actually a political campaign that was launched on the 4th of September 1920, and the movement was led by Mahatma Gandhi. Now let us see why such a movement was launched and what was the idea behind the launching of the non-cooperation movement. Hind Swaraj, one of the most famous books written by Gandhiji, in which he had proposed that the British rule was established in India only due to the help of Indians' cooperation. He believed that if we refuse to cooperate to the colonial government, then the British rule in India shall collapse in less than a year and we shall attain independence, that too in a non-violent way. So, the main aim of the launching of the non-cooperation movement was to induce the British to grant self-governance or Purna Swaraj, meaning full independence to India. The movement was actually launched and introduced in 3 stages. It was meant to unfold in stages. The first stage was the surrender of titles awarded by the British government, in which people had to surrender all the titles awarded by the government, including ministry, awards, medals, etc. The second stage was the boycott of all foreign goods and services, in which people had to boycott and discard all the foreign goods they used, from clothes to utensils to toys and to everything. People also had to give up their services in the government institutions. The third stage stated that after the launching of the first 2 stages, in case the government used repression or reacted in a violent manner, then a full civil disobedience campaign shall be launched. This was actually done to avoid any kind of violence during or after the movement. Civil disobedience movement, which was another most important movement, which we shall discuss in detail further while. Here the word boycott means a refusal to associate or deal or participate with people or in activities, and it is usually a form of a protest. This is actually a picture of a boycott movement in India, where people discarded and boycotted all the foreign clothes they used, and people were actually promoting the use of Indian clothes or the khadi, and here the people are carrying the charkha on which the khadi is spun. So, whenever a movement is launched, there are always chances of being a tussle or a collision between 2 parties. One, those who are supporting the movement and are willing to participate, and the second, those who are not supporting and are not willing to participate. Even in the Indian National Congress, the situation was not much different. Many of the members within the Congress were reluctant to join the movement. One of the reasons was that many of them feared that this might lead to a popular violence. They felt that if we refuse to cooperate to the colonial government, then they shall react in a much more repressive manner, and that was not favorable. The second reason was that people did not want to boycott the council elections. This was because entering the council was one way of gaining power, and they did not want to miss this opportunity at any cost by boycotting them. So, in months between September and December, there was an intense tussle between the members of the Congress, but later everything was sorted out and the movement was finally adopted at the Nagpur Congress session in December 1920, and the movement finally began in January 1921. A point to be noted here is the movement was actually adopted in December 1920, but the movement finally began in January 1921. Various groups of people had participated in the movement, and each of them responded to the call of Swaraj, each with their own demands and aspirations, and the term meant different things to different people. Now let us see how did different groups of people conceive the idea of nationalism. So, to begin with, let us see how the people in the towns reacted to the movement. In the towns, the movement started with the participation of the middle class people. All of them boycotted all the government institutions, Students left the government schools and colleges. Headmasters, teachers, government officials and lawyers resigned from the British institutions. Even the council elections were boycotted in most of the provinces except for the Madras council election. This was because in Madras only the Brahmins had some sort of power or the reach to do something. So the non-Brahmins in Madras had formed an association called the Justice Party, and the members of this Justice Party were reluctant to boycott the council elections just because they felt that if they could enter the council, they could get some sort of power which only the Brahmins had access to. So except for Madras, all other elections were boycotted. Furthermore, foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, even the foreign trade was boycotted, and merchants and traders refused to trade or finance in foreign goods. Even the foreign clothes were boycotted and people started using the Indian clothes or the khadi, and as a result the production of Indian textile mills and handlooms went up. So this is a picture of a boycott movement in India where all the people discarded and boycotted all the foreign clothes they used. They were actually burnt in huge bonfires. Let us now see what was the reason behind the slowdown of the movement in the towns. One of the reasons was that poor people couldn't afford the expensive khadi. This is because people had now boycotted all the foreign clothes and people started using the khadi, and this khadi was much more expensive than the foreign ones. So this is actually a picture of the khadi cloth, and this is a picture of Gandhiji wearing the khadi cloth. The second reason was that since all the government and British institutions had now been boycotted, alternate Indian institutions had to be set up in place of the British ones, and these were very slow to come up, and as a result people went back to the government or British institutions. Let us now see how did the people in the countryside accept the movement. In the countryside, the movement was accepted by the peasants. In Awadh, the peasantry movement was led by Baba Ramachandra. Baba Ramachandra was actually a sannyasi who had earlier been to Fiji as an indentured labourer. So he was the person who led the peasantry revolt. For the peasants in the countryside, the movement was actually against the talukdars and the landlords. These were the people who demanded exorbitantly high rents from the peasants. They also forced them to do the begar. Begar was the labour the peasants were forced to contribute without any payment. In simple words, it was labour without payment. Moreover, the peasants did not have any job security, meaning if they are given job today, there was no guarantee for the job sustaining tomorrow or for the coming days. So the peasants had three demands. The first one was the reduction of revenue, second one was the abolition of begar, and the third one was the social boycott of oppressive landlords. In many places, Nai Dhobi Bandhs were also organized. Nai meaning Baba and Dhobi meaning washerman. These were actually organized to deprive landlords of washerman and Baba services, just a way of opposing them. By June 1920, Jawaharlal Nehru had gone around villages, talked to the people, tried understanding their sorrows and problems, and by October an Awadh Kisan Sabha was set up. This was set up by Jawaharlal Nehru along with Baba Ramachandra and a few others, and within a month over 300 branches were set up. But due to a variety of reasons, the movement slowed down in the countryside too. Let us now look at the reasons for the slowdown. In 1921, houses of talukdars and landlords were being attacked, bazaars were looted and grain hoarders were taken over. Moreover, local leaders started misusing Gandhi's name in order to sanction all their aspirations and demands. And due to these unfavorable conditions, the movement slowed down in the countrysides too. Let us now see how did the tribals accepted the movement. Among the tribal community, the tribals from the Gurim hills in Andhra Pradesh were the first to start the movement. In this place, there existed some forest laws in which the colonial government closed all the large forest areas and also restricted them from entering the forest even to graze cattle or to collect firewood or fruits. This enraged them as not only their livelihood but their traditional rights were also being denied. Later, when the government began forcing them to contribute begar, the forced unpaid labour, they revolted, and this revolt was led by Alluri Sitaram Raju. So Alluri Sitaram Raju played a very important role in the tribals movement. He actually claimed to have special powers and could also heal people and also make correct astrological predictions. People were so much captivated by him that people saw him as an incarnation of God. Alluri Sitaram Raju was greatly inspired by Gandhi's ideas and also supported the non-cooperation movement. But the only drawback was that he believed in violence. He felt that he could only be liberated by the use of force and not by non-violence. So he was later in 1924, he was executed and captured, but people still believed in him and over time he became a folk hero. This is a picture of Alluri Sitaram Raju who led the tribals revolt. Let us now see how did the plantation workers accept the movement. So the plantation workers had their own different demands and aspirations, and for them freedom meant the right to move freely in and out of the place they were confined in. This meant retaining a link with the village from where they had come. This was because under the Inland Immigration Act, the plantation workers were not permitted to leave the tea gardens without permission. In fact, they were rarely given such permissions. The plantation workers were actually greatly inspired by the non-cooperation movement, and many of them defied the authorities and went home, but unfortunately none of them were able to reach their destination. They were caught by the police and brutally beaten up. Later in 1922, there took place a movement named the Chaura incident, which was one of the main reasons why the movement was called off. So now let us have a look at the Chaura incident. The movement took place in the year 1922 in Chaura in Gorakhpur district of Uttar Pradesh. This was when a peaceful demonstration in a bazaar turned into a violent clash with the police, in which many were wounded and many were even killed. And in return to this, the Indians attacked the Chaura police station and 22 policemen were killed. So as we can see, the movement was slowly taking a violent turn. This is a scenario of the happenings in Chaura in Gorakhpur district of Uttar Pradesh during the violent clash. So seeing all this, Mahatma Gandhi was greatly disappointed by this and he called a halt to the non-cooperation movement. He felt that the movement was turning into violence and also he wanted to give some proper training to the Satyagrahis, and so he decided to call off the non-cooperation movement. So the movement finally came to an end in the year 1922 in February. So this was all about the non-cooperation movement. Now let us discuss some important questions regarding this topic. The first question: why did Mahatma Gandhi decide to launch the non-cooperation movement? The answer is, Mahatma Gandhi believed that the British rule was established in India with the cooperation of Indians and had survived only due to this cooperation. If Indians refused to cooperate, British rule in India would collapse in less than a year and Swaraj would come. This belief made Gandhiji ready to launch the non-cooperation movement. Heading on to the second question: when and where was the non-cooperation movement adopted? The answer is, the non-cooperation movement was adopted at the Nagpur Congress session in December 1920. The third question: how did the tribals interpret the idea of non-cooperation? The answer is, for the tribals, Swaraj meant the freedom to enter the forest, to graze their cattle or to collect firewood or fruits. And the last question: mention one point of difference between Mahatma Gandhi and Alluri Sitaram Raju. As I had mentioned earlier, Alluri Sitaram Raju was the person who led the tribals revolt. So the answer is, Mahatma Gandhi was a staunch supporter of non-violence, while Alluri Sitaram Raju on the other hand believed that India could only be liberated by the use of force and not by non-violence. So that was all about the topic non-cooperation movement. I hope you have understood all the concepts and topics related to this movement. Now the next part of this chapter would be taken by Tissa Jacob, my classmate. Over to you, Tissa. Thank you.